Hey guys, Thomas Jr. here, aka Mustached, here to review the movie Godzilla, King of the Monsters. So, not only is this movie a sequel, but it is also a versus movie. And with the dichotomy of Godzilla in general, is that there was a lot of things riding on this movie, I think. I'm pretty sure. That being such things as how much Godzilla were we gonna see this time around? How much of the humans were we gonna see this time around? And so on and so forth. It's been a pretty interesting discussion, to say the very least. I had talked about and reviewed the animated Godzilla movies and how I thought those were a much better portrayal of Godzilla, even with the lack of Godzilla throughout a good chunk of the movie. But we are not here to talk about those movies. We are here to talk about Godzilla, King of the Monsters. So spoiler alert ahead, if you have not seen the movie. On top of talking about other things. Now, I'm going to do something I have not done for any other movie review yet. I'm going to do something akin closer to what I usually do for the video game movie reviews, which is talk about this from two different perspectives. One is going to talk about more of the story for the humans as their story kind of moves on. The other is going to talk about the other type of movie that this covers, which is the versus category, which would include movies such as Freddy vs. Jason, Alien vs. Predator. Those are the two that I could think of without searching up more movies. But yeah, anyway, those movies. So I'll also be talking about it from a versus perspective. So with that being said, let's get into this. So this movie takes place 5 years later from the previous Godzilla, the live-action Godzilla movie. The one where he was fighting the two kaiju that were trying to mate with each other, just so we're crystal clear. We follow this guy Mark and his broken family of his daughter and wife, his wife being Emma and his daughter being Madison. So, we're hearing a lot of news reports of what is essentially going on, how all of these shakings are happening, and how this group is being held responsible of this Monarch group, which is either hunting down or trying to save the monsters. I think they were trying to destroy the monsters or whatever, and how they were failing to do so. So we see that one of the earlier creatures that are being brought up is Mothra, which is this butterfly-like creature. So she kind of goes nuts, but but Emma has this device. They call it Orca, I believe. Your MacGuffin of the movie. And she's able to find this right frequency to get Mothra to essentially calm down. But their team gets attacked by this more militaristic team that is willing to take both her and Madison away. So we cut to Mark, the father, who's researching wolves or whatever. And he gets an update about what's been going on and catches a ride. And we learn pretty early on that there are 17 and counting monsters, as they refer to them in this movie, Titans, or if you want to say kaiju, I wouldn't blame you. I would refer to them as kaijus personally, but whatever. We also hear pretty early tellings of what I think this movie's trying to set up immediately, which is King Kong, because they immediately mentioned Skull Island and King Kong pretty early on here. So I think that is the next Godzilla vs. King Kong. I think that's the immediate movie that they are trying to set up here, because King Kong does not show up in this movie at all, which does kind of make something else in this movie kind of confusing, but we'll get to that. Anyways, so Mark is brought to his own secret facility, and we learn of this guy named Alan Jonha, who is the sort of terrorist guy who essentially took both Emma and Madison, and he wants, we learn, to bring out Ghidorah, which is this three-headed dragon-like creature. Meanwhile, Mark and his squad have Godzilla moving around them. And he's sort of just looking right at the humans and sort of doing his thing. And they learned the location of this squad, this opposing side that they are looking for in Antarctica. So they head over there, and their team gets ambushed, and Mark decides to head out. So, in a bizarre move, and I'm going to talk about this now, the mother decides to break the ice to release Ghidorah. And later on in the movie, she tries to explain that humanity is a disease, humans are to blame, we have caused pollution, overpopulation, so on and so forth. And I think this is the most confusing part of the movie, is her sort of outlook, considering that she's also trying to protect her daughter and make sure that, at least for the most part, that her husband is at least okay, question mark? Her motives are just so confusing. They just don't make sense. And she's sort of like the antagonist of the movie for a good chunk of the movie. I mean, she is the one releasing Ghidorah, and if you know what Ghidorah is based on prior movies, like the animated movies I have mentioned, you would know that Ghidorah is not something you would want to just go around releasing willy-nilly. Even if you think the ideology is that humans are an infection, which again, I don't think makes a lot of sense for her as a character, because she's also saying like, oh, I gotta protect my daughter and I gotta make sure my husband is okay, but she's willing to sacrifice humanity, which would include those two, and herself, question mark. Like, that motive just doesn't make sense coming from her. It is too out of line for... There are two different ideologies it's almost like she's fighting over, and they just don't mesh well at all. Now, if it was more of a hostage situation, if it was Alan the one discussing Ghidorah, and he was the one that ended up discussing, like, humanity's kind of fucked up and shit, and then he's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of our time to go, and his and you could tell that his character was kind of done with this world. On top of all of that, I think that would make a lot more sense, in terms of, fixing this, little human era, and, you know, again, having Emma held more at gunpoint rather than she is sort of the one who's trying to, like, say, like, humanity is all kind of fucked up. Like, how does she come to that revelation anyways? Like, she did research, question mark? I mean, we don't ever see that. We just hear her say that humanity's fucked up, and that Ghidorah, out of everyone, out of all the monsters, is gonna fix that. How does she know Ghidorah? Like, I don't know. Like, it's a leap in logic that just doesn't really fit. Like, how would she know anything about Ghidorah? Like, how does she know that Ghidorah would be a good fit for any of this? Nonetheless, we'll move past that little moment. She breaks the ice, sets Ghidorah free. So she gets Ghidorah to stop temporarily using that device I mentioned, and Godzilla arrives, which leads us into our first fight. Now, for the sake of argument and getting into the versus part, this is probably, arguably, the best fighting movie to ever exist currently. And of course, I'm immediately comparing it to the two movies I had mentioned and any other versus movie. We have 3 fights, which is already more than every other fighting movie in existence.
Okay, alright, I'll talk to you.
Sorry for that bad cut, I was interrupted. If you want to help me prevent that, or help me get better equipment, you can always support my Patreon. Anyways, getting back to what I was saying, I was mentioning how Godzilla arrives and they go at each other, and how I felt like, as far as versus matches are concerned, that currently speaking, this is the best of the fighting franchises. As I mentioned, Freddy vs. Jason, this beats out that, this beats out Alien vs. Predator, this beats out any other fighting versus movie that I can think of currently. I probably, in terms of pure fighting spectacle, would probably put every other versus movie far below this. With this having the most fights in it out of all the versus movies, that being a total of 3 major battles. The first being between Ghidorah and Godzilla. This airstrike comes in. Mark gets knocked out by something or other, and then gets woken up. And he ends up going to Mexico because that's where the creatures are heading. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this is where Emma starts talking about this whole infection thing that I think makes absolutely no sense in terms of her character. But as we are doing that and as they are bunkering down, we see a new Titan or Kaiju rise, which is Rodan. Rodan is a pterodactyl-like or combination of that and dragon, a fire dragon. And Rodan is now colliding with Ghidorah because Godzilla is already sort of taken down. So technically there are 4 fights in this, but Rodan is pretty easily shot down by Ghidorah here, which would make sense. The military side, is doing their thing. They shoot this air removal missile as Godzilla tries to come back in for Ghidorah. The missile, or the nuke, or whatever it was, hits both of them, but only Ghidorah is able to withstand this missile. Godzilla is more so incapacitated for the time being. So we see that other kaiju, I'm just going to call them kaiju, start rising. And this one doctor is called, but I'm not sure what other significance this Dr. Lane character holds throughout the entire movie. But nonetheless, Mothra, we learn that Mothra is born, or reborn I should say. And Madison, seeing what her mother had done, decides to leave. So, meanwhile, the main team with Mark here finds out that Ghidorah is an alien, which does correlate with the animated movie, surprisingly, Ghidorah being very alien, and the people in that movie were more so alien than human. Which is why they were on Ghidorah's side in the first place, by the way. So anyways, Emma tries to explain what's going on. or she's like starting to like figure out that her side was probably really stupid. But Ellen's not having any of that, and Madison and the daughter is overhearing everything. Anyways, Mark heads out, and we see that Mothra is calling out to Godzilla in her own way. The team now want to help get Godzilla back on his feet. Him and I ended up calling. I know that's not his name, but I ended up writing in my notes Yamada. I know that's not his name. The guy in the first Godzilla movie that was like, let them fight. That character. I forget what his name was in this movie. Unfortunately. But he talks to Mark about how he might want how Mark would team up with the demon known as Godzilla, because in the previous movie, I forget where this happens, where his son was taken by Godzilla. I really don't remember that happening at all, but someone might if someone could like put a time frame in my comment section, that would be really helpful, so I know what the hell they're referring to. So anyways, Madison ends up like running to the stadium, and the main team we see fighting Godzilla's home, and Yamada, I know that's not his name, but whatever. He goes individually to go help Godzilla by feeding him a nuke and then sacrificing his own life. So, Madison, using the Orca device, as they refer to it as, is able to temporarily stop all the monsters around the world, which, by the way, King Kong, again, not among them, which, again, that raises a big question of why King Kong is not affected by this device. So Yamada sets up his bomb, he touches Godzilla, and it goes off. So that's his send-off, is that he gets to have his moment with Godzilla. And Adam is like lecturing, saying how, Ghidorah is gonna do this, and how he's gonna reform the world or whatever. And now Madison's doing the wrong thing, so the mom ends up leaving, and he lets him go. And Ghidorah, we cut to him, Ghidorah, cutting the device, going after Madison, as she manages to outrun lightning, which is a pretty impressive feat for a human. And I'm gonna say it now, I know that there's gonna be a meme of it pretty soon, considering Game of Thrones. Her screaming at a dragon, a three-headed dragon, or as some people would like to call it, reeing at a dragon. I'm not sure why people think that's a cool thing to do, or a last moment, like, oh, I'm gonna die, so I'm gonna yell at this big thing. I'm not sure why that's a thing now, but, I don't know. Is that gonna become the new cliche now? Is that becoming the new, sort of gimmick, is to yell at a big dragon thing? Cause, boy, does that seem more meme-worthy right now, anyways. So yes, she does scream at the Ghidorah, and lo and behold, this allows Godzilla just a convenient amount of time to essentially return for round 3. Mark, seeing Godzilla still sort of taking pretty hard hits here. Mothra reappears, but so does Rodan, and they also have their fight. So technically, I think there are 4 fights in this movie, I want to say. This particular fight is between Mothra and Rodan, as they are fighting too. So there's a separate fight going on here. Meanwhile, the two parents rekindle and they go searching for medicine. Mothra is trying to get to Ghidorah, but ends up getting hit a little bit too. So the parents somehow find a way to rebuild that device because it got broken at some point, to stop Ghidorah at least for a moment, to give them enough time. So Emma, seeing what's going on, everyone else is fleeing towards this plane or whatever it was, this helicopter, and Emma decides to stay behind and sacrifice herself to move Ghidorah, give Godzilla enough time to essentially get enough energy to go Super Godzilla. I'm not really sure what else I would call it at that point, but this allows Godzilla enough strength to kill Ghidorah. And as soon as he does, all the other monsters within the vicinity, they all start to move up to him, and they all start to bow down to him. And there's more implications that after the movie that there are the other 17 monsters that are out there. Some of which are already at Godzilla's side, bowing down to him. But there's also King Kong, which also, again, did not bow down. He's probably still on Skull Island somewhere. And that was Godzilla, King of the Monsters. So, as a story, I do think that the family dynamic got a little bit broken from Emma's character. Her divisive way of thinking, her ideology, to me, just didn't make any sense. And I feel like that definitely holds back the family dynamic part of the movie, which is pretty huge chunk of the dynamics of the human characters. There's this one comic relief character that we see throughout the movie. There's this other guy who's this lead scientist, but none of these characters really have their own stories going on per se. So yeah, it mainly focuses on this family in terms of a story being told, and just the two ideologies. I don't think they picked the right character to stick that landing for. They made it more obvious, but the animated movie, I feel like at least every character was in their place in terms of what side they were on. It made sense. Here, it just doesn't make sense. So I would probably give at least the story aspect a 4 out of 10, unfortunately. I do think that they could have really reworked the story to make a lot more sense. And they're really going to have to do something to explain how King Kong didn't arrive, but that's for a later movie, I suppose. And at any rate, so that is in terms of the story, but how was the actual fighting? And I said I would create a separate score for that. I already said that I do feel like this is, in terms of versus movies, the best of them currently. There's still some bizarre cutaway moments that are pretty abrupt, which has been an issue of Godzilla movies kind of consistently. So I feel like if they just smoothed out those transitions of the fighting, it would have been a solid 7 out of 10, but I would give it a 6 out of 10 um, in terms of that category as well. And I wouldn't give any other Versus movie currently a 6 out of 10, so that should tell you a lot. I would give every other Versus movie below a 6 out of 10 easily. Again, that is just pure on the fighting side of things. So the last thing I will talk about is the potential of the Godzilla cinematic universe, which is something I discussed with, well, my brother discussed with me, I should say, because he saw this movie first, and then I saw it. And I think the immediate go-to would be Godzilla versus King Kong. Again, they set it up pretty early on in the movie. King Kong's nowhere conveniently to be seen. I do feel like there is that. There is like little hints of a potential baby of either Mothra coming about. There's stuff about Ghidorah coming back as a Mecha Ghidorah, possibly. Because one of its heads got cut off at one point in the movie. There's always a possibility for a Godzuki movie, which is one of Godzilla's kids. Godzuki, of course. So there's that. There's so many ways they can take this right now. But I do think that the immediate one would be Godzilla versus King Kong. I do feel like they set that, again, they just set that one up first, which is why I think they would deal with that one first in terms of if they were to continue down this Godzilla cinematic universe. Ghidorah coming back, I would think, would probably be the later one of ones they would probably want to cover later, just because they want to. I think if they were smart, they would space out a Ghidorah fight with not just another Ghidorah fight. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. So I think the safest bet, in terms of a timeline, if I were to specify, would be Godzilla versus King Kong would be the immediately first one. Godzuki would probably be the second one, seeing how that all comes about. And maybe they could do something really interesting, or, they've killed other creatures before. I would be curious if in the Godzuki movie, the end of that would be something killing Godzilla and then doing a Mecha Godzilla or something of that kin. I'm not sure if that would how they would do it, but that is just me throwing out an idea. There is, of course, the return of Ghidorah or Mecha Ghidorah. Again, I think out of all of them, that would probably be saved toward the ender half of the movies. And I'm pretty sure there are other kaiju that they could have messed around with in between these movies, sort of as a sort of little in-between moments for Godzilla, for this potential Godzilla cinematic universe that has a lot of potential going for it. I think if they just work a little bit, tighten up that the cutaways from the monster fights, and they just make sure that their human characters are very, like, this is what their goal is, this is what they're going to stick to, and they can have the character, sure, you can have a character develop over time, but the development has to make a little bit more sense than saying right in front of your daughter that you're going to end all of humanity. Or, the daughter is in the vicinity to hear the mother say that. So I do think that is a bit wonky in terms of storytelling, is that she's really going to say all that. Anyway, defining who the characters are, the human characters, because the human characters are always probably going to be a part of Godzilla. That has never been a issue for me. That has always been a part of Godzilla, is that the humans, they are a big part of Godzilla's story. That's just how it is. I would assume that the strongest one in terms of human interaction would probably be Godzuki. I mean, I think if I remember the cartoon, did Godzuki have the ability to speak? It has been a really long time since I've seen Godzuki, but Godzuki being particularly very small in comparison to Godzilla, I think that can lend itself to some, if they decide if they want to make Godzuki talk, which I actually wouldn't have an issue with if they can make the mouth, and the CGI just work with that. I think that would be totally fine. And again, just tightening up what the humans' goals are and tightening up the cutaways from the monster fights. I think if they can tackle those two things, Godzilla has the potential to rival the Marvel Cinematic Universe easily. It is. I'm stuttering, but I think there's so much potential here for Godzilla to really make a mark against the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I do think that having some competition in this regard is finally warranted. I think we should finally start to see that there are other things outside of these superhero movies that are, these long-running, and nothing's opposing it. Nothing has been competing with it. I think we have reached a good point here where we can say maybe Godzilla is our... Who knows? I don't know. Well, it's definitely a wait and see. We're 2 movies in. It's pretty early on in terms of a Godzilla cinematic universe. They already have a lot of setup for King Kong, so I think a lot of this is gonna ride on Godzilla versus King Kong. I think a lot of this is definitely gonna ride on that 3rd movie. They have to tighten up their characters, and they have to tighten up their the cutaways from the monster fights. If they can accomplish those 2 things, I think we will have a confirmed Godzilla cinematic universe. I think we'll be fine. I think it'll be able to compete very easily with the Marvel movies moving forward. If we can get that Godzilla versus King Kong movie to be the solid versus movie with solid written characters. And yeah, there's a lot of potential here, but a lot of that is going to ride on Godzilla vs. King Kong. I do think that this is a decent in-between, though. I do think that there's potential here. I'm not going to write off this movie completely just because of this poorly written character, but and there are a lot of badass moments. I'm not going to overlook that either. So yeah, that is my spoiler review for Godzilla, King of the Monsters, as well as spectating on the Godzilla Cinematic Universe. So if you enjoyed that, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my Discord server, the other to my Patreon page. Any donations are greatly appreciated. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.